So more than 250,000 people have been evacuated from their homes in France, where fires in the Gironde region have reached 7 miles away from the central city there. A giant fire thunderstorm, this is a pyrocumulonimbus, has been created in Gironde, where local officials were warning that the fires could burn for many weeks. The President, Emmanuel Macron, has chaired an emergency cabinet meeting this morning. Elsewhere, more than 100,000 people have had to leave their homes in Spain. Let's talk about all of this with Dr Jess Neumann, who is Associate Professor in Geography and Environmental Science at the University of Reading. A very good afternoon, Dr Neumann. Can we start by just you telling us what exactly a pyrocumulonimbus is and does?
So it is essentially a huge thunderstorm which is generated by the very rapid rising heat caused by forest fires and wildfires. And that makes a very unstable atmosphere, and allows those clouds to rise and cool very quickly. And there's just lots of energy, kind of like our thunderstorms, but rather than just hot ground, it's fire that's generating them.
So why wouldn't that also be of benefit if a storm is bringing rain with it?
So they can bring rain with them. They can also bring a lot of lightning, and lightning is a known igniter of very dry tinder and dry environments as well. So it's kind of a bit of both going on. It can also be quite unstable winds. So for firefighters on the ground, they're maybe getting on top of one fire front, and then these conditions are hampering setting up new fire fronts, it's blowing embers in different directions. So it's a very complex sort of system to have to navigate.
As you've watched the severity of these fires increase, what have been your thoughts about it in geographical and environmental science terms?
So parts of the Mediterranean, they have had fires, historically many times. This one is different, driven by the very dry weather we've had, or they've had. Very extreme heat waves across Europe, another one due to happen later this week, temperatures up over the 40s again. And that has just created this, mixing pot perfect for massive crown-based fires. So that's where fires have got up into the canopy. They spread very quickly and they're very difficult to contain. This partly comes off a very wet winter. So a few months ago, lots of abundant, lush vegetation, and that's dried out, and that's created this situation, this compound situation that we're in now.
And I'm not attributing any kind of, with the benefit of hindsight, or blame with this question at all, Dr Neumann, but because there was a very wet winter followed by an incredibly hot summer so far, was there something that could have been foreseen, and therefore something that could have been done in any way to try and assuage the severity of the fires when they did break out?
Well, it's very difficult because, first of all, forecasting is fantastic. We're very good at forecasting weather, perhaps a week in advance. But anything beyond that, you get a lot of uncertainty. So following a wet winter, at that point, it wasn't known that it would be such a hot, dry summer. It's taken us by surprise in the UK as well, somewhat. But also, there's just a lot of work that has to go into a future of people understanding risk. It takes a change in mindset, but there are things that people can do, sort of making sure in the future that dead scrubby areas or vegetation is managed just at the back of their properties. Anything you can do at a very local level to reduce that fire risk is going to have a positive impact.
Do you wish that we would stop talking about climate change and global warming in terms of degrees, and perhaps we should use a measure like land that has become uninhabitable, numbers of people who've had to move from their homes, in order to just clarify our minds a little bit more about what is happening?
Absolutely. And I think anything that we can use to put this into the forefront of people's minds, and it's going to be different in different places. Wildfires are going to be a good measure, for example, in the Mediterranean. We're also seeing them in Scotland right now. But anything about sort of climate evacuees or climate refugees, something that drives home that not only is this something that is happening to other people, but can happen to us as an individual as well. Floods, droughts, wildfire, they're not confined to particular areas as such, and everybody is at risk in the future.
What are the health dangers after the fires are over?
So in terms of public health, smoke, inhalation, lots of people struggling with asthmatic symptoms, a bit like as well the general situation we have with people's health during heat waves. It's not just that we're dealing with fire, we're dealing with very, very hot, dry weather as well, which has a knock-on impact. So there will, unfortunately, whether that is directly related to the wildfires or the heat waves, be excess deaths as a result of these extreme temperatures this summer.
And what does a fire like these ones do to the land after it's burnt through?
I mean, it decimates land, so there will be vast areas that will be completely razed to the ground. There may even be property and people's livelihoods that are affected as well, particularly farmers, for example. And the wildlife, that's going to have a massive impact as well. But also, if we just think about the pollution that can have in our rivers and in our natural watercourses. That said, many of these Mediterranean forests particularly are designed to burn periodically, just not quite in the way that they are burning this year.
Right. Gosh, I'm surprised at that because some of those forests in that region are pine forests. They're conifers, aren't they? They're extremely tall. I'd assumed that they were there for the duration. They were absolutely not there to be lost every once in a while.
So pine forests, absolutely, very high in resins, are perfect again for burning. But things like the cork oak, the holm oak, these are sort of naturalized vegetation of the Mediterranean, and they require periodic burning to keep those forests, fit and healthy. But as I say, not with the extreme temperatures and to the degree of burning that we have seen this summer.
Sure. Does it make it less likely, Dr. Neumann, that we will have fires like this in the following couple of years, just because so much has already been burnt this summer?
So the areas that have burnt will hopefully get some respite because that vegetation needs to grow back. That said, we can have grass fires. That does not preclude the fact that in a year's time, the same areas might burn. But there are many, many other huge, huge areas of France, Spain, the Mediterranean, the UK that are very much still at risk. So a bit like floods, just because you've got one year does not mean that you're safe the next year.
And tell us about our own climate. We have had some dreadful fires across the country so far this summer. But is it possible that we could, in future summers, see fires as severe as those ones we've seen in France and Spain?
It doesn't take a huge amount to get a fire going, particularly once it reaches up into trees and gets into that crown of a tree. It can spread quickly and rapidly, and it can pose real damage to property and life. We have so far in the UK not had extensive fires like this, but absolutely a changing climate, more extreme weather like what we're seeing, these very high temperatures and a lack of rainfall means we are certainly, I could never say that it wouldn't happen here, because it certainly could.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this afternoon. That's Dr Jess Neumann, Associate Professor in Geography and Environmental Science at the University of Reading.